What if I told you that one of the oldest civilizations in Europe pulled off one of the biggest financial illusions of the 21st century? That a country famous for inventing democracy, philosophy, and the Olympic Games also managed to trick the European Union, the European Central Bank, and the global financial markets for almost a decade? And that when the truth finally came out, it didn't just destroy one economy, it nearly tore the entire Eurozone apart. This is the story of how Greece tricked the EU, why it happened, and what it cost not just Greece, but all of Europe. To understand how Greece pulled this off, we need to rewind to the 1990s, when Europe was obsessed with one idea: unity. After centuries of wars and crises, European leaders wanted a new beginning, a single market, a single currency, a single Europe. The Maastricht Treaty of 1992 laid down the rules. Any country that wanted to join the new currency, the euro, had to prove that its economy was stable and responsible. There were strict conditions. Budget deficits couldn't be higher than 3% of GDP, and total public debt couldn't exceed 60% of GDP. If your country spent too much or borrowed too much, you didn't get in. It was supposed to ensure discipline, a club for responsible economies. But there was one problem. Greece didn't fit. In the late 1990s, Greece was beautiful but broke. Its economy was growing, yes, but not fast enough. Government spending was huge, tax collection was weak, and corruption was systemic. By the time the euro was about to launch in 1999, Greece's debt to GDP ratio was around 100%, nearly twice the Maastricht limit. On paper, Greece didn't qualify, but Greece wanted in, desperately. Joining the euro meant joining the future. Lower interest rates, easier borrowing, foreign investment, and the prestige of being part of Europe's elite. So Greece did what desperate nations sometimes do. It decided to make the numbers work.
In 2001, Greece finally joined the euro, but it didn't happen by cutting spending or fixing its economy overnight. Instead, the government reclassified certain expenses, used optimistic forecasts, and even counted some one-off revenues like the sale of state assets as permanent income. Still, even that wasn't enough, so the government turned to Wall Street, specifically Goldman Sachs. In 2001, Greece made a secret deal with Goldman to use a complex financial instrument called a cross-currency swap. It worked like this. Goldman gave Greece cash upfront in exchange for future payments tied to currency rates. But the transaction was structured off the books. It didn't count as debt under EU rules at the time. In other words, Greece borrowed billions without it showing up in their official deficit. It was legal, technically, but ethically very questionable. The result was that when Greece joined the euro, its finances appeared to meet the Maastricht criteria. Behind the scenes, it was already running massive hidden debts. The illusion worked. Greece entered the eurozone, and for a while it looked like a success story. Once inside the euro, Greece suddenly had access to cheap money. Before, investors had charged high interest rates because Greek bonds were risky. Now, with the euro, Greece looked as safe as Germany or France. That perception was crucial. Interest rates fell, borrowing became easy, and Greece started borrowing. A lot. The government spent billions on public wages, pensions, and infrastructure. There were huge projects like the 2004 Athens Olympics, which cost over 9 billion euros, far more than budgeted. But the Olympic glow hid a darker truth. The money wasn't coming from growth, it was coming from debt.
Between 2001 and 2008, Greece's government debt rose from about 150 billion euros to over 250 billion euros. And since the economy was growing too, it didn't look disastrous. Yet. Everyone, from Greek politicians to EU officials, wanted to believe the story of a united, modern, successful Southern Europe. But under the surface, something was about to break. Then came 2008. The global financial crisis exploded. Lehman Brothers collapsed. Banks failed. Markets panicked. Suddenly, investors started asking hard questions. If Wall Street could fall, what about governments? And one by one, they started looking at weaker economies in the Eurozone: Portugal, Spain, Italy, and Greece. By 2009, Greece's new government, led by George Papandreou, took office and decided to review the country's finances. What they found shocked even them. The previous government had underreported the deficit. Instead of 6 or 7%, it was actually 12.7% of GDP, more than 4 times the allowed limit. Later revisions pushed it closer to 15.6%. In other words, the books had been cooked for years. And when that truth came out, everything collapsed. Almost overnight, Greece lost the trust of the markets. Investors refused to lend, borrowing costs skyrocketed, Greek bonds were downgraded to junk status. The government couldn't pay its bills, banks were exposed to billions in bad debt, people started withdrawing money from their accounts, afraid that the country might leave the euro entirely. In May 2010, the European Union and the International Monetary Fund stepped in with a €110 billion bailout package.
But there was a catch. In exchange, Greece had to impose austerity, massive cuts to public spending, pensions, and jobs, along with tax hikes. The results were devastating. Between 2008 and 2016, the Greek economy shrank by over 25%. Unemployment peaked at 27%, youth unemployment went above 50%. Thousands of businesses closed. Public anger exploded in the streets of Athens. For ordinary Greeks, this wasn't a crisis, it was a catastrophe. The first bailout didn't solve the problem, it just kept Greece afloat. By 2012, the country needed a second bailout, another $130 billion, along with a controversial debt haircut, where private investors took losses of around 50% on Greek bonds. But austerity continued. GDP kept falling. Debt-to-GDP ratios actually rose because the economy was shrinking faster than debt was being reduced. By 2015, Greece had received more than $260 billion in bailouts, the largest rescue in EU history. And yet, the country was still trapped. In 2015, frustration boiled over. A new anti-austerity party called Syriza, led by Alexis Tsipras, came to power. They promised to end austerity and renegotiate with the EU and the IMF. Finance Minister Yanis Varoufakis became the face of rebellion, a leather jacket-wearing economist who challenged Brussels directly. For months, Greece and the EU engaged in a tense standoff. Negotiations failed, banks closed, cash withdrawals were limited. In July 2015, Greece held a referendum asking the people whether to accept more austerity. Over 60% voted no.
But the EU didn't back down. With no cash and a collapsing banking system, Tsipras was forced to accept yet another bailout, and the very austerity his people had rejected. The rebellion had failed. By 2018, Greece officially exited its bailout programs, but the scars remained. GDP was still 20% below pre-crisis levels. Public debt stood at around 180% of GDP, the highest in Europe. More than 500,000 Greeks, many of them young and educated, had left the country. The economy was technically stabilized, but only because so much had already been lost. A generation's future was traded for fiscal discipline. So, did Greece really trick the EU? Yes, but not alone. The Greek governments of the early 2000s clearly manipulated their statistics. They used off-balance sheet swaps, delayed payments, and optimistic projections. But the EU and the European Central Bank also looked the other way. Everyone wanted the Euro project to succeed. The European Commission didn't rigorously check the data. The markets assumed all Euro countries were equally safe. And banks like Goldman Sachs profited from designing the very deals that hid the truth. It was a shared illusion and a shared failure. The Greek crisis wasn't just about Greece. It was a warning, one that the world didn't fully heed. Today, many advanced economies carry record-high debt levels. In 2008, global debt was around $140 trillion. By 2024, it's over $300 trillion.
Some European countries, including Italy, France, and Spain, have debt ratios close to or above 100% of GDP. The US passed that threshold years ago. And once again, cheap borrowing and temporary deficits are being normalized. Sound familiar? Even the same mechanisms, off-balance accounting, optimistic forecasts, political denial, reappear again and again. The difference is, now it's not just one small country, it's the whole system. If Greece was the canary in the coal mine, what happens when the mine itself starts collapsing? So, what can we learn from the Greek saga? First, you can't fake stability forever. For a while, Greece's accounting tricks worked. The numbers looked fine, the market stayed calm. But eventually, reality wins. You can hide deficits, but you can't hide debt. Second, a shared currency without shared responsibility is dangerous. The euro tied countries together, but without a shared fiscal policy. Germany and Greece used the same currency, but not the same discipline. And when one fell, everyone paid the price. Third, austerity can cure the disease, but kill the patient. The EU's response may have saved the euro, but it crushed a generation of Greeks. Economies aren't spreadsheets, they're people. And when politics ignores that, the cost is social as much as financial. The Greek crisis is over, officially, but the system that caused it is still here. Governments still borrow to win elections, markets still chase yield until the music stops, and international institutions still assume that if things go wrong, someone else will pay. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, and the melody of 2008, 2010, and 2015 might just be playing again. So, how did Greece trick the EU? By doing what everyone wanted, making the dream of European unity look perfect, even when it wasn't. It was a story of ambition, deception, and denial, and it ended with a price no one wanted to pay. But if there's one thing we can take away, it's this. Economic truth always wins in the end, whether you acknowledge it or not. If you found this story eye-opening, share it, because the next crisis may not start in Athens. It could start anywhere. The question isn't whether Greece fooled the EU, it's whether we're still fooling ourselves.